Materials provided by Amico.
We're going to be doing some chasing and repoussé. Well, it's more like pseudo chasing and repoussé and a little bit of embossing.
So what's the difference? Like, you're calling it pseudo repoussé. Like, what's real repoussé and what's our pseudo repoussé?
Okay, real repoussé is when you have hammers and little steel tools that you use to push from the back of the metal, so you're pushing the metal out. Whereas chasing, you're working from the other side and you're pushing the metal back in. You kind of use the same together, but we're basically doing that, but we're not going to be using hammers and steel tools. We're going to be using more embossing tools. We're going to make a cuff, and I really like the cuff as a platform because it provides a lot of space for making designs, and it's very big and it's a statement piece, and I love statement pieces.
So is the cuff like a bracelet, basically?
It's similar to a bracelet in that it's worn around the wrist, but it doesn't actually connect all the way around like a bracelet. There's a little opening and you just slip it onto your wrist instead of over your hand.
Could you make a cuff that's like up here?
Totally.
So it could be like any part of your arm, basically.
Yeah, you could even make an ankle cuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So cool.
For my cuff, I'm going to choose a source of inspiration, a reference image, and I have some options. I have this branch, which has a lot of texture. It's very big. This branch, too. I like the leaves and the variation with the berries.
So why these branches? Like, why don't you pick like an apple or something like that?
Well, the cuff is longer, so you need something that's going to fill up the whole space and not be condensed to one thing like an apple. And I also like that these have variation in the form, so you're not just making one round bulbous thing. Yeah. For today, I'm actually going to use this octopus. It's kind of fun, and it's got a lot of texture, a lot of volume, a lot of dimension, so you can really work with the metal and create something very interesting.
Well, so my question is, why did you bother to go to the market and get an actual octopus tentacle? Like, why not just Google octopus tentacle and then you have an image that you can just draw from?
I mean, you can do that, but I prefer to have the actual shape, especially when I'm working in 3D, because I really want to know why the shadows are there, why the form is how it is, how it's actually turning around in itself. So I'm not just making it up in my head.
And I guess also you can turn it around and look at which parts are interesting. Like this part, I like how this suction cup is large and these are smaller, these are even smaller. And even just getting to touch it.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to.
Well, anyway, it's squishy since you're not going to touch it. And you would just never have that sensory experience if you were looking at a photograph.
Exactly. We're going to begin our cuff with a pattern. And I like to make a pattern so I know exactly what size the metal is going to be and how it's going to form around my hand. So first, I'm going to cut my little printer paper so it's a little bit thinner. I find that it gets a little difficult if you are using a larger piece to form it around your hand. You can go smaller than this if you want, or maybe a little bit bigger. It's up to you. You are the artist.
I mean, is there such a thing as too small?
I think it could get hard to actually fit a design on there.
Oh, right. So because you don't have as much area to draw something.
And that's why I'm choosing this size. So I really have a lot of room to fill it up with my octopus tentacle. The first thing I'm going to do is wrap this piece of paper around my wrist, mark this side, and then if you could mark the other side.
Mark where?
Probably right here.
So I'm making like a triangle?
Yep.
Like that? But how did you know how to mark this side?
Well, I'm basing it on how much distance I want between the cups.
So wait a second. This goes here and you're looking at, so there's a gap here. Okay, so this is there and then this is here. I see. Okay.
And I might actually adjust it a little bit more so the angles are a little bit more even.
But does it matter how wide the opening is?
It's best to make it, I'd say maybe an inch.
Okay, all right.
But you want enough room. It depends really how thick your wrist is.
I see.
So you can slip it through.
So you really have to custom design this for a person. Like you can't just make a whole bunch and just put them out like that.
I mean, you can. There are standard ones, but I think that's the beauty of being able to do this yourself is that you can make yourself or someone you know something custom and something that nobody else is going to have.
It's much more personal that way.
And so when I cut this, I'm actually going to leave a little bit of excess because when you do cut the metal, it gets a little sharp. So I want to fold a little bit of it over. I'd say that's about a 1/4 inch extra.
And I guess if it's too long, you can always trim it.
You can always trim it. It's very easy to cut with the scissors. So I'm gonna take these top edges off so there's no overlap. You'll see why when I actually fold the metal over. Now I'm gonna cut my pattern out. So here we have our pattern. This is the top and this is the bottom. It's gonna be wider at the top because your arm gets bigger. It tapers towards your wrist. So now I'm gonna trace my pattern on here so I know how much room I have to work with. Remember that some of it's gonna be cut off because we're gonna fold the ends over. So now I'm going to take a look at my octopus tentacle and decide where exactly I wanna look at it from. Like where am I getting the most dimension, the most texture? That could be interesting.
Seems like that would be the big section cups.
I think I like the big section cups because then you're actually gonna have the perspective is a lot more interesting. So I'm gonna just really quickly sketch in what I'm going to do lightly, and then I'm gonna go back in a little bit more.
Could you actually add like a second tentacle if you wanted to fill in all the space?
Totally.
So that way maybe the image isn't so literal?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're actually drawing something that you don't really see. So it's like a shape that you're just inventing.
Based off of this though, it's still gonna be informed by the textures I see and the patterns I see.
Could you exaggerate the scale?
Oh, totally.
Cups? Like make one huge?
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I keep looking at this one and the way it jumps out, it's very dramatic.
It's kind of strange that it has one large tentacle. I don't know what happened there. Notice how I'm not putting anything really against the edge of the metal.
Why is that?
Because you're gonna end up warping it and it's gonna be very hard to fold it. So I like to keep things within a little bit. Even this is getting a little too close, but I'll not put it that close on the actual piece of metal. I'm going to be working with lightweight copper. It's basically embossing copper, and I got this at Blick. So you can get it at probably any art store. And I really want to get the very light kind. It's not copper leaf, it's copper foil. Copper tooling is what it's also known as. And I'd say if you're going by gauge, it's about 36 gauge metal. So it's very, very thin.
So you have to buy metal that's particularly for embossing. You can't just go get random pieces.
If you get very thick metal, you're not going to make a dent. You can scratch the surface, but we're actually going to be shaping it.
So it's a lot more sculptural, the process.
It is, yeah. I'm going to call this the back because this is the way it's curling. And it's going to end up curling around our wrist like this.
Oh, so you need to make sure it's the right direction.
It'll end up being easier to form it around your wrist if you go with the curve that's already there. As to not waste metal, I'm going to try find a section where I'm not using I don't want to put it right in the middle. So you could probably make a few cups out of this. And I'm actually going to put a little bit of extra because it is a little small. But I'm just gonna mark a little bit of where I'm gonna go.
Are you pressing really hard?
Nope, I'm pressing very light. So now I'm gonna take my scissors. And once again, you're gonna be very careful because these edges are very sharp.
Can you actually cut yourself on this?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It's imagine a worse paper cut.
Ugh, that sounds awful.
This is a wooden tool that came with the embossing metal. And I'm going to take the flat end. You could probably use a spoon or a flat end of a dowel. And I'm just going to run it along the edges because sometimes it gets a little crinkly. Here we have our cutout pattern. I'm gonna score it. This is a pretty hard line. So I'm really pressing against
this is where you really need to put pressure.
Yep, and very carefully I'm gonna push this up. And I want to remember to actually, before you pull that up, I'm gonna cut off this little corner. Otherwise, we're gonna get overlap.
Oh,
and
so
you
that's
don't want
why
exactly.
Got it.
So then I'm going to push this down very carefully, very gently, the flat end of a spoon, and just very gently push it down.
That's so neat.
Yeah.
Is it better to use metal tools as opposed to wooden tools?
It depends how much of an impact you want to make on the metal.
Okay.
Metal on metal is going to get you a more strong line, more crisp edges if you're folding it over. Whereas wood, I'm probably going to use for the first sketches or when I first start pushing the metal out, so I'm not deeply scratching the metal. Metal will scratch metal, whereas wood doesn't really scratch it. It just kind of dents it. There you go. Wow, and now I'm going to do the same thing, on the other side. And here we have our cuff ready to transfer designs. I'm ready to go for it.
Now, if I were teaching this to a class, are there any safety issues here other than maybe getting a paper cut on the side of the metal?
I'd say at this point, no. Working with the metal, I just really stress that the edges are very sharp and you want to store it very carefully so you're not crushing it when you store it. I actually normally store mine in a little Tupperware.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so nothing crushes it, nothing dents it when I'm transporting it. As you can see, I have added this little pad of paper, which is essentially to put a little bit of barrier between this and the hard surface of the table. The table is textured, and I don't want that texture appearing on my metal.
So the metal's that sensitive.
Oh, yeah.
It picks up everything, which is good, I suppose, for doing a design.
It is good. So you have to be very wary of where you're putting it on. I like to do a pad of paper because it has a little give. So you can push into it in the design. You'll start to see the design actually showing up in the paper too. So what I'm starting to do now is draft my drawing, and I'm using a Sharpie, and while it is making a dark mark, it'll come off with a little bit of rubbing alcohol.
Okay.
And I'm starting from the back because I'm going to start to push out the bulk of the metal. I'm going to start pushing the metal outward. So to do that, I'm actually going to push it down, and I think I'm going to start with the most prominent parts. And the most prominent part to me was this really large suction cup. So here we go. We see a line. Doesn't look like much, but
it looks really cool.
It's going to start looking super cool, yes. And I'm going to start pushing out the actual lines instead of just outlining it. So to do that, I'm going to make little marks and just pushing down.
So is that around the Sharpie outline?
It's within it.
Okay. So you're not actually pushing onto the Sharpie outline, right?
Nope, I'm pushing up to the line that I drew.
Okay.
With my pen, like with my ballpoint pen.
Okay, so actually the Sharpie's maybe a good guideline because you're basically pressing around it.
Yep. And so I'm being careful how I make my marks because this will show up in the texture.
Are you just trying to make it flat right now?
I'm trying to push it out. So I'm actually extending it up.
Oh, wow.
So you see how it's starting to puff up there?
Right.
Yeah.
So is it important to like push a little, flip it over and look, push a little, flip it over and look? Or can you just sit here and do this and be okay?
I like to look every once in a while. And when I do flip it over, what I'm going to do is start outlining it on this side using the flat side of my wooden tool.
Oh, so that makes it punch out even more.
Yeah, so you're flattening because the copper is going to warp a little bit.
So now you're doing the front of the copper.
So you're not going to do just the back then just the front.
Okay.
You're really going to push from all sides. It's what you need to do, and it's going to change depending on your design.
Well, so how do you know if you should do front or back? Is it just a reaction to what you think you need to do?
Yeah, it is. And also my design isn't just going out. The suction cup had a hole.
Yeah.
So I wanted to complete this suction cup before I move on to the next one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It almost looks like a donut, doesn't it?
It does kind of look like a donut. I'm going to clean a few of my marks off because I can't really see what I'm doing with all the dark pen on it. And I'm going to just clean it with a little bit of alcohol. So just dab it in like a little, I think this is a tissue. And just wipe a little bit of away.
But you're just doing that in the parts you've already pushed down on.
Yeah.
You're not doing it on the other parts.
No, I don't really want to clean those parts away. Otherwise, I'm not going to know where they're going to go.
Right.
But now I can actually see what I'm doing, whereas before I had really no idea.
Oh, okay. So in the beginning, you're just trying to get an outline, and now you can actually start being more refined with the pushing.
Yep. So there's some things that I need a little bit more detail to get into, like when I get into the smaller suction cups. So I'm going to use this barbecue skewer, like a kebab skewer, just to go in there. And it's softer than my pen because my pen also gets in there, but it's just to push in little details where I don't want much pressure, but I just need a little bit of a finer point. So now that we're done with the chasing and repoussé, we can actually start to form it and make it into a cup.
Awesome.
And something I like to do before I do that is feel where we folded the metal over on itself. And it's a little bit, that might actually hurt your arm.
Oh, okay.
So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of sandpaper, thank you, And I'm just going to actually take a small piece. You don't need much. And I'm just going to rub it over there.
Does that really make enough of a difference?
It'll make a little bit of a difference.
Let's see. Oh, wow. That's so much smoother.
And I don't like this corner either. That's a really sharp corner. And something you can do if you really don't like that is you can actually cut it so it's rounded. And just like that corner as well. Ooh, that's really sharp.
Do you have to do the long? Like, do you have to sand here?
You can if it feels sharp. This doesn't feel too sharp for me. So it just depends how you cut. And if you cut all jagged, definitely.
But so I don't understand why you didn't fold over the long edge as well.
When you put the cuff on, it slides on this way. So it's going to be these edges that are really pushing against you. This is just going to lay flat against your skin.
Okay, I see.
Whereas this actually could really cut you.
Okay.
Yeah, these are a little sharp, but we'll live.
Yeah, but it's so much smoother than it was before.
Yeah.
I mean, I really could feel it a lot, and now I can barely feel it.
The metal is springy. So in order to get it to fit nicely around your wrist, you actually need to fold it around something that's a little bit smaller. So it'll spring to the size of your wrist.
Oh, so you make it tighter on purpose, and then it just widens on its own?
It does, because metal is very springy. Use whatever you want. Like I used the back of like a softball bat. Like you can use anything. So you're gonna do this very lightly. So now even this is proving to be a little bit big. So I'm gonna actually take a glue stick here and I'm going to rub the metal alongside it. And I'm doing this very carefully. You don't wanna crease the metal because that's gonna just stay there. So I'm actually not gonna make it circular. I'm making it more ovular because if you look at your wrist, it's not a perfect circle. It's more like this shape. So that'll fit you a little bit better.
Do you have to try it on while you're doing this, or do you do that later?
That might be good to do. I'm looking down it so I can see if it looks circular or if there's parts are rounded or if there's parts that are kind of flat. And as I look at this bottom edge, that is a little bit flat in some places. So I'm gonna take my metal and run it along my glue stick.
So that's how you make sure that the edge is really round and not funky?
You can use your fingers too. And like you just press it in a little bit.
It looks really smooth now.
So it's still a little bit loose. So it's just a matter of like playing with it.
But every time you put it on and take it off, doesn't that ruin the curve of it?
Yeah, it's gonna get a little bit deformed. So it's something you have to be very gentle with. Thicker gauges of metal will not move as much. Now we're gonna patina our cuff. And the patina is essentially gonna make it black.
Well, why would you want to make it black though? Like, don't people like the color of the copper?
I don't want it this shiny. The liver of sulfur is gonna give it a more matte finish, and then you can actually go back in with some sandpaper and take away parts of it, so that it brings out your design even more.
Oh, that's cool.
It is really cool. So we're gonna be using liver of sulfur today as our patina, and it smells very bad. So make sure you use it in a very well ventilated area and try not to touch it with your hand. So I'm gonna be using some tweezers. And it looks like these little green crystals and smells like rotten eggs.
It does stink.
It does, yeah. So for something this big, I'm going to use maybe 2 crystals.
Well, how do you know how much to use though?
Well, a little bit gets you very far. So I'd say for a piece around this size to anything smaller than this one, you don't need much. A little goes a long way.
But is the amount of liver sulfur, is it the water amount, or is it how big the piece is that determines how much to put in?
Water amount. And I'm going to give this piece enough water so that it covers it.
Okay, so you're actually going to dip it.
I am going to dip it.
Okay,
and we're going to use water that's almost boiling. We don't want it boiling. We want it right before it boils. Now we're ready to pour our almost boiling water in our container. And it's good to use a heat-proof one. I don't think this plastic will melt, so we're okay. So very carefully.
I mean, this shouldn't be a container you're going to eat out of again later, right?
I'd say dispose of it or use this for gross chemicals.
Okay. Oh, weird. So are the crystals going to dissolve entirely?
They should.
I mean, how long do you have to wait before you can actually
Honestly, it's best to use it immediately, so I'm going to use a little stir. And if you get this on your hands, it's probably gonna smell like that.
But you shouldn't get it on your hands, right?
Don't get it on your hands, but you'll be okay. Just wash it really good. Don't eat it.
Now, is this something you can pour down the sink or is this toxic?
You want it to deactivate when you pour it down. So wait for it to cool down and then flush the sink, probably with some water for, I'd give it like maybe a minute or so.
So as long as it's cool, it's safe to pour down the sink.
Yeah, you're good. I'm just going to go ahead and...
Do you need tweezers?
I'm not going to get it on my hands, but just to show you how quickly it works.
Oh my God, that's crazy. Wow.
Beautiful.
That's beautiful.
And so I'm going to just dunk the whole thing in.
Oh my God. I wasn't expecting you to drop it in.
Yep. And there it is.
My God, that is so fast.
And then I'm going to put it on.
But it's not going to like stick to the paper towel,
No,
is it?
I'm going to rinse it with some water. Now that we've rinsed it, we're ready for our second coat. So into the liver we go. And
so it's really only in the liver sulfur for like 2 seconds.
You don't want to leave it in longer than that.
Oh, really? Why not?
Because it gets flaky.
Is 2 dips enough or do you do more?
I would say stick to 2.
Okay.
And it's already darker than it was last time.
Right.
And now we're going to rinse it again.
I know we're making a cuff, but technically speaking, couldn't you just take the metal and just build whatever sculpture or shape you want to make?
Absolutely. The possibilities are really endless. It's such a flexible material. You can really do a lot with it.
Because I know you are coming from this from a jewelry perspective, but for me as somebody who works in sculpture, I just think about all the sculptural opportunities that you have with a technique like this.
Definitely.
So now that it's all dry, I'm going to bring out the design by sanding away a little bit of the patina. So you have to do this very carefully. You don't want to push it too hard, otherwise you're going to end up denting it.
Oh, so you really can damage it still at this point.
Oh yeah, you can always damage it. So treat it with care. So I'm just lightly rubbing it, focusing on like the high parts, because you won't be able to get inside the indents.
Right. So you're trying to get to the parts that are really raised.
Yep.
But couldn't you sand like here on purpose?
Totally. We can do some of that.
If you just want to
And think about the direction you're going with the sandpaper.
That matters?
You're going to see it. It's scratching the surface.
Okay.
Unless you like the look of going all whatever direction, you're going to have marks going every direction. I'm going one direction, like the band.
Wow.
So you really start to see it come out more.
Oh, I really like the way that looks.
I actually don't like my lines going one direction, so I'm going to kind of cross hatch it.
Oh. Yeah, I think I like the different directions too. It has a little bit more texture to it.
So I probably will have to curve it again because I'm working with it so much. As you can see, our octopus tentacle is emerging from the darkness. And so I'm going to reform it a little bit, and I'm going to take out my handy glue stick. And you can see that my hands have turned a little black, and that's because you're actually taking away some of the material. So you're going to get this little residue. I recommend you wash your hands, and don't do this by where you're going to eat, or if you are using the same table, probably lay something down to catch the dust. All right, and here's our final cuff.
It looks amazing. I mean, I was surprised that working with metal could be so simple, because when I think about working with metal, I just think about all these big machines and like fancy tools and super toxic materials and stuff. But you seem to do this with really ordinary supplies. The metal wasn't crazy expensive, and we were able to get this like beautiful patination with very little effort. So I was surprised by that you could make jewelry and metal work so accessible in that way.
My isopropyl alcohol, and I'm gonna wipe.
You can't say isopropyl, just say alcohol. I know that we're making a cuff right now, but in theory, couldn't you just make this a metal sculpture?
Now I'm gonna use a little bit of alcohol. I can't put this.
Oops.
Now I'm gonna use a little bit of store-bought.
A store-bought. Where else are you gonna buy it from?
I don't know, some fancy like place.